Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Yes. Good afternoon. We call the Conference Committee on House File 2431 to order. I am, for the moment, Dan Wolgamott's reign of terror is over. And so we are just, I think, going to have Senate nonpartisan staff walk through the Senate offer number 1, and we'll start there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. For the record, my name is Megan Bursch, a nonpartisan fiscal analyst supporting the Senate Higher Education Committee. So I'm looking at the spreadsheet that says Senate offer number 1 in the top left corner, dated 5/16 at, wait, I don't think I have the right copy of this.
11:56 a.m., I think, is the time I have.
Okay, no, that's not the right time. It's okay.
All right, looks like we have a little bit of a snafu with spreadsheets, so we're gonna recess for a brief time? Yep. Yes, so committee's in recess. All right, our long national nightmare is over and we are back. We did have the correct spreadsheet, it turns out. We were just, there was some confusion about the timestamp, so we just wanted to make sure we were all looking at the right thing. So Ms. Bursch, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so looking at the one dated 5/16, 11:56 a.m., we're all good. So starting on line 1, the Senate offer also nets to the global target amounts for higher education of $22 million in fiscal years 25 through 27 and $4.5 million in 28-29. On line 4, there is a $34,484,000 increase for the state grant program in 25 through 27 and a $16,818,000 increase above base in 28-29. On line 5, the Senate maintains the Senate position for the child care grant program. On lines 6 through 9, the Senate accepts the House offer for state work study, tribal college supplemental grant assistance, Get Ready, and the Minnesota Education Equity Partnership. On line 10, the Senate offer proposes reducing the base appropriation for the United Family Medicine Residency Program by $500,000 per biennium and adding additional rider language to require a 100% match from the organization. On line 11, the Senate accepts the House offer to maintain the base level of funding for Minitex. On line 12, the Senate takes the same approach as it does for United Family Medicine Residency Program, also for Hennepin Healthcare Graduate Family Medical Education, to reduce the base level of funding by 50% and add rider language to require a 100% match. On line 13, the Senate maintains the Senate position for the Summer Academic Enrichment Program. On line 14, the Senate accepts the House offer on the Emergency Assistance for Post-Secondary Students Grants Program. On lines 15 and 16, the Senate maintains the Senate position for underrepresented student teacher grants and student loan debt counseling grants. On lines 17 and 18, the Senate accepts the House offer on hunger-free campus grants and fostering independence higher education grants. On lines 20 and 21, the Senate maintains the Senate position for the Student Parent Support Initiative and Direct Admissions Minnesota. On lines 22 through 26, the Senate accepts the House offer for the Paramedic Scholarship Program, the Hennepin County Medical Center Addiction Medicine Fellowship Program, agency administration, consolidating the campus sexual assault reporting rider into agency administration, and the one-time cancellation for ALS research grants. And on line 27, the Senate proposes an increased appropriation of $100,000 per biennium for the College Financing Literacy Act, which is a policy item that is also included in Article 2 of the Senate offer. Moving down to the transfers section in the Office of Higher Education, starting on line 29. On line 30, the Senate proposes a $1 million per biennium decrease from base for the spinal cord injury and traumatic brain injury research grants. On line 31, the Senate maintains the Senate position for elimination of the ongoing appropriation for dual training grants for legal cannabis employers, but removes the previously proposed $500,000 one-time cancellation in fiscal year 2025 from that account. On lines 32 through 34, the Senate maintains the Senate position on the teacher shortage loan repayment program, rural veterinarian loan repayment program, and agricultural educators loan repayment program. Moving down to Minnesota State colleges and universities, on lines 39 and 40, the Senate accepts the House offer to consolidate the riders for student tuition relief and sexual assault reporting policies into O&M back on line 38, but maintains the Senate position to also consolidate menstrual products access on line 41. On line 42, the Senate accepts the House offer on free course materials, also called Z degrees. On line 43, the Senate proposes reducing the original Senate position by 50% to fund the Lake Superior College ERTC PFAS remediation at $500,000 one time in fiscal year 2026. On lines 44 and 45, the Senate accepts the House offer on the Emergency Assistance for Post-Secondary Students grants and hunger-free campus grants. And on lines 46 and 47, the Senate maintains the Senate position not to include the subrider for workforce development scholarships for law enforcement, and to maintain the one-time $500,000 cancellation for the Kids on Campus initiative. Moving down to the University of Minnesota, the Senate maintains the Senate position of consolidating the riders on lines 51 and 52, so the University of Minnesota Morris tuition waivers and menstrual products access into the O&M line item on line 50. On line 53, the Senate accepts the House offer to reinstate the rider for cannabis research. On line 54, the Senate proposes funding the University of Minnesota Mayo Foundation partnership at 50% of the base level, but limiting eligibility to only the University of Minnesota. So the Mayo Foundation would no longer be eligible to use those funds. Flipping to the back, page 2. The Senate position, or the Senate offer maintains the original Senate position to eliminate funding for the Research and Innovation Office on line 55. On lines 56 through 59, the Senate accepts the House offer to restore the base level of funding for economic development research, the Bell Museum, the Humphrey Forum, and the Minnesota Geological Survey. On line 60, the Senate maintains the Senate position of eliminating the funding for the Talented Youth Mathematics Program. On line 61, the Senate proposes reducing the appropriation for cannabis research by $2.5 million below base per biennium. So that would leave $4 million per biennium. On line 63 and 64, the Senate accepts the House offers for emergency assistance for post-secondary students grants and hunger-free campus. Next is the Mayo Clinic. On line 68, the Senate proposes funding family medicine residency programs at 50% of the current base level of funding and adding a rider to require a 100% match from the Mayo Clinic to access those funds. And then there is already agreement on the post-secondary institution licensing and registration items. So moving down to the state grant parameter changes. On line 80, the Senate accepts the House offer to limit tuition increases to 1% per fiscal year. On line 81, the Senate accepts the House offer to decrease the living and miscellaneous expense allowance to 110% of the federal poverty guidelines. And on lines 82 through 86, or no, 82 through 85, the Senate maintains the original Senate position of changing the application deadline to the 30th day of the academic term, increasing the AFR for dependent students to 100% of the parental contribution, setting the student aid index, parental contribution and student contribution below 0 to 0, and setting parental contributions below negative 1,500 to negative 1,500. So those are all the original Senate positions. And I think that concludes the review of the spreadsheet, and I'll pass it to Mr. Watson to review Article 2.
Do we want to, I wonder if maybe we want to see if there are questions or comments on the spreadsheet before we move on to the policy piece? Yeah. Oh, I am not seeing anybody. Oh, don't need to hold on to this. It's just making me nervous. Chair Eric.
So we're, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're looking at on line 61, the cannabis research, and I'm wondering if they could come up and just explain the difference. So there's two buckets of money kind of in this cannabis research, and part of it goes to ag extension, part of it goes to the research. And I'm wondering if someone from the Cannabis Research Center could come up and just explain how much is in their base and how much goes to the other ag extension part.
Is there someone, looks like we've got someone ready to go. If you could come up and identify yourself for the record and answer Chair Eric's question.
Thank you, Chair Coulter and committee members. I'm Tracy Toomey, the director of the Cannabis Research Center, and thank you for Representative Rarick for asking for that clarification. The original appropriation was $2.5 million per year to establish the Cannabis Research Center. The remaining amount goes to extension at the University of Minnesota to do research that our center is not connected to, and I'm not aware of what they're using those funds for. So does that help answer the question, or would you like to have more information, Representative Rarick?
Chair Fateh.
Yes, and if I'm jumping, I'm sorry. Yeah, the intent was to have the funds go directly, all of it, to the Cannabis Research Center and the School of Public Health. So that was the intent, to have it go to them. The intent in the Senate offer.
Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it looks like you are funding at $4 million per biennium, which is a little bit below what the 2.5, I believe you said 2.5 per year, that they are needing. So, so we're trimming a little bit off of the cannabis. So is there something in the language then that says that the Ag Extension will not get the money and it's just going to go to the Cannabis Research Center?
It hasn't been written yet, but that was the intent. One of the questions we asked around the funding is how much would be doable to keep the lights on, and that's how we got the 4 million figure also.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chair.
Any additional discussion or questions on the spreadsheet? Not seeing anything. So I think then, Mr. Watson, if you want to walk us through the policy provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, I'm looking at Senate offer number 1, which is date and time stamped 5/16/2025 at 1:53 p.m. It's the right one. I'm going to briefly go through Article 1 to highlight some of the policy language changes there that are in the chart. Some might double up. So on the first row, the Senate accepts the House offer on the tuition cap. And the next row, the Senate accepts the House offer to provide extended availability for state grant program appropriations. The next row, the Senate proposes counter of a reduction in the base funding by 50% and requiring 100% match in the United Family Medicine residency program. And the Senate makes the same counteroffer in the Hennepin Healthcare. Going down to R5 to R6, on the EAPS grant, the Senate accepts the House offer to adopt the Senate language there. The Senate also has an amendment that I'll describe here, and that is A15. And this is going to apply to the EAPS program, the Hunger-Free Campus program, the Student Parent Support program, and the Dual Training program. And this just adds the word annual to each of these to clarify that the grants should be made on an annual basis. So for each of those programs, the Senate is agreeing to the House position subject to and proposing this amendment.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Watson, looks like Chair Fateh has a comment here, so we'll pause for a moment. Chair Fateh?
Yeah, and this is something that we ran into a problem with the Hunger-Free program this year. So this just would have an RFP each year to make sure that the funds are spent and going where they're intended to go. So that's where the language came from.
Thank you, Chair Fateh. I think that was everything. So, Mr. Watson, you can continue.
Okay, going to the next page, page 2 of the document. The first row, the Senate agrees to the House offer to take the Senate language on the Hunger-Free Campus grants, and again, with the A15 amendment. The next row, the Senate maintains its position on the Min-State Section Organization. On the next row, the Senate maintains its position on how to organize the UMN riders. On the last row on that page, the Senate proposes reducing the base funding on the UMN Mayo Clinic partnership by 50% and restricting eligibility to UMN. So the money would only go to UMN. Turning to the next page, page 3 of the document, now we are on Article 2, the policy provisions. In the first row, the Senate maintains its position on including the direct admissions program language requiring public and charter schools to participate by the 2029-2030 school year. Skipping down to the row that starts with R32, the Senate accepts the House position of including the opiate antagonist language. On the next row, the Senate accepts the House offer to include the Senate language on the hunger-free campus designation. On the next row, R34 to 36, the Senate accepts the House offer to include the definition of retaliation in the campus sexual misconduct policy. And on the next row, the Senate maintains its position of including the Senate language in the campus sexual misconduct policy process procedures section. In the last row on that page, the Senate accepts the House offer to use the House language to define pregnancy or related conditions. Turning to the next page, the first row, this is on page 4. The Senate accepts the House offer of adopting the Senate language on how to treat appropriations. This would allow default retention by OHE of 5% of a competitive grant appropriation. On the next row, the Senate accepts the House position of accepting the staff recommendation on the Consolidated Competitive Grant and Student Loan Repayment Program reporting. On the next row, the College Financing Literacy Act, the Senate maintains its position of including this language. The next row is changes to the calculation for assigned family responsibility. The Senate maintains its position of setting AFR-dependent students to 100% of the parental contribution and recognizing AFRs based on a negative federal parental or student contribution to a floor of negative $1,500. On the next row, the Senate proposes to accept the House's accepting of the staff recommendation, but as modified by the A13 amendment. And the changes here are on R49 to R50 of the side-by-side, and you can look at the Senate language. And what this does in current law, if an institution loses eligibility for federal student aid, the commissioner of OHE has the option of removing their eligibility for state student aid. The changes that are proposed in both sides of the side-by-side would make that automatic. So if an institution loses its ability to get federal student aid, it automatically loses state student aid. And this language would set it back to being at the discretion of the commissioner.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, just a moment. Chair Fateh.
Yes, that's some of the language that we worked on with OHE as well, and we're concerned about delegating too much state authority to the federal government, and our position on my preference was to have the commissioner assess the situation and be able to make the decision.
Thank you. You can continue, Mr. Wappen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm at the last row on that page, page 4. The Senate agrees with the House position of not including the language that would require certain institutions to post information about student outcomes on their websites. Turning to page 5, the first row, the Senate agrees with the House position of including the change to the living and miscellaneous expenses from 115% to 110% of federal poverty guidelines. Going to the next row, the Senate maintains its position about providing additional directions to OHE when it is required to reduce state grant awards due to an insufficient appropriation. On R51, the Senate maintains its position. So there are two changes here that the Senate had in its provision. One was to provide OHE with the ability to recognize a student or parental contribution that is less than negative $1,500 in the event of a surplus appropriation. So it would add an additional option. The option that is currently in law is to, OHE has the ability to increase what is recognized for living and miscellaneous expenses. That is in paragraph A. And then there's additionally, the Senate added language in a paragraph B that would require OHE to make that adjustment before increasing the living and miscellaneous expense allowance when it had a surplus. The Senate proposes adopting the change in paragraph A, so giving OHE the option of increasing awards using the new Senate language, but not including paragraph B, which would have dictated the order in which OHE used the two options that it had. On the next line, the Senate agrees with the House proposal to take the Senate position or the Senate language on the state grant award. These were identical, lowering the lifetime cap from 180 to 120 credits. On the next line, the Senate maintains its position on changing the deadline for applications for state grant awards for an academic term for the end of the fiscal year following that term to 30 days after the start of that term, and proposes a modification to include the same deadline for the North Star Promise. So they would be aligned on deadline. Skipping down to the last row on that page, the House agrees with the House proposal to adopt the House language around requiring MnSTATE and requesting UMN to ensure that all North Star Promise eligible students receive resident tuition rates. Turning to page 6 of the document, and skipping down to the fourth row on that page, the Senate agrees to the House offer to include the House-only language on self-loans that came from OHE's agency bill. On the next line, the Senate agrees with these were the same. So the House proposed taking the Senate language, and the Senate agrees. And this makes technical changes to the tribal college supplemental assistant grants. On the next line, the Senate agrees with including the additional Senate language, clarifying that the supplemental assistant grants will be calculated based on enrollment in all terms. And flipping over to page 7, the Senate agrees with the House proposal to include the House-only language around dual training grants. That's the same for the next row down. Skipping down to the third row from the bottom, the Senate agrees with the House offer to include the Senate language that removes a requirement for OHE to gather Minnesota institutions' dual credit acceptance policies. On R75, the next row down, the Senate agrees with the inclusion of the House-only language that does not include for-profit organizations within the list of organizations that are eligible for the spinal cord and traumatic brain injury grants. On the last row on this page, the Senate agrees with the House offer to include the Senate language around the endowed chair account, mineral research, and scholarships that rebalances those accounts. Turning to page 8, the Senate agrees with the House position to include the language requesting the UMN Landscape Arboretum to allow a disabled veteran to bring one guest for free. On the next row, the Senate agrees with the House offer to include this second part of the changes around opiate, requiring opiate antagonists to be maintained in certain residential campus buildings. The next row down, the Senate agrees with the House offer to include the Senate-only language regarding small issue pool allocation. On the next line, the Senate agrees with the House offer to include the Senate-only provision that suspends the application of subdivision 7A, which would permit OHE to increase state grants in the event of a surplus. And on the last row, on the last page, the Senate agrees with the House offer to include the Minnesota State Enrollment Fraud Working Group, but would like to include the addition of a representative AFSCME to the working group.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. To our Senate friends, I'm so glad you accepted so many of our offers to take your language. Any questions or discussion to the policy spreadsheet?
I can speak to both.
To,
Both. Yeah. I can speak to both policy and.
oh, sure. Why don't we start with Chair Fateh?
Oh, you want to start
Or
first? Okay, thank you.
Chair Fateh.
And I appreciate that, yeah, as you see, we did accept a lot of the House provisions also. There were small differences in the residency programs. We tried to balance the importance of the programs, but also the need to have some cost savings. And we felt that it would be important to have some of the hospitals share the burden with the state, with some of the matching funds. So that was where we went with that. Around the state grant program, I think we took your offers on the tuition cap, I'm sorry, and also the LME, but we didn't support around adjusting the negative SAI because that's something that we felt really strongly about. And I wanted to call out some of the data that we provided last time on the sheet. I think it's still in everyone's packets around the impact of state grant parameter changes on state grant awards, showing that both student parents and min-state colleges are disproportionately impacted. We saw for students that are independent with kids would see with the House rationing 42%, upwards of 42% decrease in their state awards, and also min-state and two-year colleges a 39% decrease. So that's where that's something that concerned us, and I think that's for the budget side. For the policy side, in terms of the direct admissions and the college literacy, we wanted to continue the trend of students continuing to increase enrollment in our schools, but also showing families and students that college is a real option and a viable option for families, but also doing so in a way coupling with the other program that they're able to make decisions that are financially responsible for them and their families. So that's how we got to that.
Okay.
I tried to be brief, so thank
No,
you.
you did a great job of being brief. Thank you, Chair Fateh. Chair Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was wondering, I know we're probably going to open this up to public conversation because I think it's important when we've made this interesting change, I'll call it, in the residency programs. So in the House, we had substantial, long conversations with every single system that came in that has residency programs, and they went into great detail about their budgets. I know you didn't quite have that level of discussion here, but you know, they're already burdened with quite a bit of the cost of residency. Each system is slightly different with how much that burden is. And so I'm wondering at some point if we could have them come up if they're in the room. I know I can look around the room and I can see that there's a couple folks here, but I think it's really important for you to hear from them in the sense of how much they're carrying already and how small their margins are and how difficult that is. So that was a policy decision that we made in the House because we just heard how expensive and how difficult it is to do a residency program. The other thing I would say is direct admissions is really, really problematic for us. It's problematic for our high schools. It's adding another mandate. They're already heavily burdened. And I'll, believe it or not, my dinner conversation with my senator husband, we talk a lot about the burdens that are placed upon schools. And so for sure, the GOP House, we are absolutely opposed to adding yet another burden upon them. So that would be a hard no. The direct admissions piece is a really difficult thing, and that would be an absolute no for us. The other thing I would say is, in more conversations that we've had in the room and outside in the hallways and in my office, specifically about R36, 39, dealing with the sexual misconduct policy, and the private colleges, and maybe they can come up and speak to it themselves as well. That's a challenge for them too. And I won't speak for them, but I know that particular language has some issues and some problems. And personally, I would be maybe more comfortable just removing that whole section, but we can have that conversation also. The other thing I would say is, one of the things that in the global agreement, the agency administration, you have 5%. We had 10% to withhold for grants. I would like to hear from OHE to see if there may be an anomaly as far as state agencies go, that they can do the work that they need to do for grants on 5% as opposed to 10. I just want to hear from them to make sure that we're not making it really difficult for them to administer grants. As we have found, as I'm sitting next to the chair of the Frog Committee, it becomes very problematic when we don't have enough staff oversight, and so they can go and put their eyes on it and see all of that. So I would ask if they would be able to come up as well. But otherwise, I do appreciate the things that you have adopted, and you actually adopted some of our ideas too, so that's helpful. In jest, I know that our chair started by saying that you agreed to our adoption of your provisions, so that was always fun to see. But we did see that you did adopt some of our provisions as well, but we've got a little ways to go, so we'll keep going back and forth. I also want to just say, as a person that really appreciates transparency, I really appreciate this venue, that not only we all get to hear this, and I appreciate our nonpartisan staff in particular. I always tell them offline a lot that we really appreciate your work and your expertise and helping us walk through this. And so to do that here in the public setting is really, I'm very, very grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Rickett. I'm sorry, you asked for OHE to speak to grants, the private colleges to speak to campus sexual assault, and I forgot to write down the first thing you said, and I don't remember what it was. Health systems, thank you. So why don't we go in order then? Health systems, if there are folks here who could talk about the Chair Rick's question regarding the residency programs. I see. Thank you. If you folks could identify yourselves for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jessica Oaxaca, and I'm the Advocacy Engagement Manager at Hennepin Healthcare. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you for the continued conversation and, of course, the recognition of the importance of our training programs, specifically our Addiction Medicine Fellowship Program and our Family Medicine Residency Training Programs. Specifically, just thank you for including the Addiction Medicine Fellowship in both the House and Senate offers. This will ensure that up to 6 providers will be deeply trained in addiction medicine each biennium, positioning them to care for the thousands of Minnesotans with addiction challenges that go untreated each year. So we're very grateful for that investment. Thank you for recognizing the vital importance of continued state support for family medicine residency training at Hennepin Healthcare and partially adding that back to the Senate offer. Currently, the Office of Higher Education grant provides $645,000 annually to support our family medicine residency program. This equates to approximately $19,000 per physician trainee. However, the true cost to train a single family medicine resident at Hennepin Healthcare is $188,000 per year. So to put it plainly, Hennepin Healthcare is already shouldering the vast majority of this burden. Even when factoring in all the other available funding sources, Hennepin Healthcare is contributing nearly $161,654 per trainee per year in unfunded costs. So that means that 85% of the costs to train family medicine physicians are already borne by Hennepin Healthcare. The only realistic solution here would be to reduce the number of physicians that we train each year by 2 to 3 residents students. That represents, of course, a significant blow to our capacity to train family physicians who really go on to serve Minnesota's most medically underserved populations. Of course, right now we're at a time when primary care shortages are worsening, and safety net institutions like ours really play a critical role, and this reduction would have some long-term consequences for that. So we ask for your continued support to maintain this essential investment in Minnesota's future family physicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oaxaca. Proceed.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wasn't sure if you wanted us to come up at the same time or not, but Nikki Valender with Mayo Clinic. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I know we also have spoken about the value of and the public good that teaching hospitals provide with residency programs. Mayo Clinic also has a family medicine residency program that has received state support in the past. I think when you heard us speak about it previously, I think the state appropriation was something like 12% of the overall investment made, with the rest being from Mayo Clinic. So again, I've really appreciated that support. Appreciate the Senate's approach to bring Mayo back into that mix. And so again, appreciate the focus on GME. I do have some other comments, but I can save those for later in the day too. And I can't remember if I said my name, but Nikki Valender with Mayo Clinic, sorry.
Thank you. You did, but you're good. All right. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, conferees, my name is Dalton Danielson with Alina Health on behalf of the United Family Medicine Residency Program. First, I want to thank conferees for the House position, as well as the Senate for including funding for the United Family Medicine Residency Program in offer number 1. Alina Health already leverages significant resources to make the United Family Medicine Residency Program whole. To Hennepin's point earlier, the cost of residence is growing at Alina Health and United Family Medicine Residency. That cost is just under $250,000 per resident. So this funding from the state represents a significant investment in those residents in helping us operate this program at full capacity. I just want to make a note, back in 2015, the legislature came to us asking us to expand the program by 1 residency slot in exchange for extra funding. So the need for family medicine residents is there across our state. We've built this program into a nationally renowned family medicine residency program. We get over 200 applications from across the country every year for the 7 open spots. Folks want to come here to learn from our faculty and learn what it means to take care of rural communities, underserved communities, and communities across the state. Many former residents are practicing in your communities right now. And then I'll just make a final point that these are not specialists. These are family medicine doctors. These doctors provide comprehensive care to you and your families when you need it and where you need it. So we appreciate the Senate's position, and we urge the conferees to accept the House position and fully fund the grant to United Family Medicine Residency. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Rick, does that satisfy what you were looking for? Okay, excellent. So we'll move on then to, I'm sorry, Chair Fateh.
No, thank you so much. And the testimony was very helpful, and I appreciate Chair Rarick and Representative Robbins and yourself. I think still I strongly believe that the program match is extremely important. I understand that maybe there might be tight budgets on their behalf, but also I think our state is also going through the same thing. We were going through some of their information as well, and we saw Mayo Clinic has 24 employees making $1 million or more, and same with Alina. Alina has 12 employees making $1 million or more. So I think that they do have the ability to make some adjustments.
Thank you, Chair Fateh. I think we will move on to see if there's someone with the Private College Council who can speak to the points that Chair Rarick raised about campus sexual assault and that process. Welcome. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you. My name is Allison Grebner. I'm the Government Relations Director at the Private College Council. I think to your point, Representative Rarick, and I think I've spoken with each member here on the conference committee just about the concerns with the requirement for a live hearing, which is included in the Senate provision. You heard from OHE earlier this week, as well as Title IX experts at St. Olaf and Hamlin. I think back on Monday, You heard about the deterrence to reporting and the sort of adversarial nature that can come about in a live hearing. I guess I would say that, institutions have robust processes in place and are best determined or in the best position to determine what's the right approach to handle these types of issues on campus. And so I guess what we would ask is that the live hearing portion of the Senate language not move forward, in part so colleges can, again, make the best determination for what's needed on their campus.
Thank you, Ms. Grubner. Any questions or comments? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, well then, thank you, Ms. Grubner. We will move on and call up our friends at OHE to discuss, I believe it was was it the carry forward on grant administration, or am I thinking of something else? It's possible I'm thinking of something else. Chair Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question was, so when we were doing, or not me, but when the global negotiations were happening, I wanted to make sure that we're following the spirit of those negotiations. And I wanted to be absolutely clear if you need 5% or 10% for the competitive grants for the retention amount.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Dennis Olson, I serve as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. And Chair Rarick, thanks for the question. I guess, first and foremost, just appreciate both positions, recognizing the need for additional admin funds to administer grants, either, those that are legislatively named or competitive grants. I say legislatively named because a lot of those grants, and I know that may be a little bit of extra information, not in consideration of the original question here, but those grants typically have either specific language along each grant, or unfortunately, some of them do not have any admin language whatsoever. For those that do, some of them are capped at 3%. I know we heard a proposal early on in the House regarding law enforcement use of force training, and that was proposed at a 2.5% admin. Those percentages do get difficult, honestly, to appropriately oversee and administer grants. So, if it's a consideration of 5% or 10%, I guess, my position is I appreciate the fact that we're having that conversation in the first place. And a lot of language does include up to, I guess, the language up to. And we take that really seriously within the agency. This isn't a flat 5% we'll pull or a flat 10%. We will only utilize, or take what's needed to effectively manage the grant. And, we shared testimony early on. I think you remember our manager of grants and workforce initiatives, Megan Fitzgibbon, testifying, saying that, competitive grants in particular have their own monitoring requirements, but even legislatively named grants are essentially a competitive grant without the competition. We still have all of the monitoring requirements, all of the pre-award risk assessment requirements, the RFP process, we review financials, and, even outside of actual grant administration, other divisions within the agency, like our audit division, are heavily involved to, make sure everything is up to par, and that's even prior to making an award. And then, of course, during the award, site visits, physical site visits on hand to review financials, all those are necessary. So, if, I guess, since I have the platform here, if I could advocate for, retaining a percentage here, whatever the conference committee wants to consider, but also making that uniform or, across both competitive grants and legislatively named grants. So it would be incredibly helpful to the agency just to make sure we can keep that monitoring to an appropriate level.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. Since you're there, I just wanted to ask your opinion on the section R51, where in the Senate position, they're directing how you would ration in the case of insufficient appropriations for the state grant. So it's page 5, the second section from the top. And I honestly, don't know a ton about this, so I'm just truly looking for your view on whether you want to be more directed in statute about rationing or not.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Robbins, appreciate the question. I will say the Senate language is helpful in that, it's actually, it provides some clear instruction within the law. During current rationing procedures within the current school year and fiscal year, we had some questions in terms of what our potential authority is, and I know you've heard some differing testimony too from representatives from the systems, primarily University of Minnesota. This language will kind of clearly give us the ability to do what I think was suggested. So it's helpful for us to at least have statute language there, although like I had testified in prior conference committees and even during both House and Senate hearings, we would appreciate flexibility, where we'd be able to retain that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any, Chair Fateh.
Thank you, and I appreciate that also. We heard pretty clearly from colleges that they would want clear and predictable rationing levers, so I think that we can take the language back, and happy to work on that with you guys also. I also had a question around the program administration that was brought up by the House members around the percentages. Would it be helpful to go maybe 10% towards competitive and then 5% for non-competitive grants, just to give you a little bit more room? On the Senate side, obviously, I'm tasked with being the fiscal hawk when Senator Duckworth goes wild on spending, so I'm here to ask that.
Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Fateh. That is something that honestly would be helpful. I guess a clear and consistent language throughout all of our grants, would be something that's kind of more sustainable and predictable, ongoing in terms of how we build our own agency administrative budget and budget within our individual divisions. And I will just point out, I failed to when I was first answering Chair Rarick's question, that the provision in the law only applies to, I believe, new programs, and so this would help. Chair Fateh, what you're suggesting, would help with existing competitive and legislatively named grants as well. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's very important to me that we follow the leadership, their agreement, the global agreement. And I just want to be clear, your understanding of the percentages that you can retain for OHE. Through that global agreement, are you understanding that you get 5 or 10, or do you think it's unspecified?
Sorry, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Rarick, my understanding of the components of the agreement were that the overall agency administration number, so without consideration of individual grants, was to be universally accepted. That along with any fee revenue, other than that, it was unspecified in terms of specific either competitive or legislative named grants. That's my understanding.
Chair Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That helps me tremendously because I want to respect the agreement. I want to make sure you have what you need. Obviously we, in both offers, you can see that we took care of the agency increase, the fee increases and all those things so you can function well. So I just want to make sure on the record, I'm crystal clear with what you need and what the agreement was. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Rarick. And that was my understanding as well, that agreement referred to the operating adjustments rather than grant administration. So any further questions, comments, concerns, complaints? I am not seeing anybody jump up at the moment, so process-wise, I'm sorry. Looks like Ms. Grubner is making her way back up here.
Lucky me. Excuse me. It's Allison Grebner again. Twice in like 20 minutes. Lucky me. I just wanted to share a couple of comments about the state grant parameter changes in out in the open for you all to consider as you move forward. I think, the council remains concerned that the 1% tuition cap in the state grant formula continues to be floated. I know that we spent a lot of time discussing that earlier this week, so I'll just flag that for you. The other item that was concerning is the Senate provision moving the AFR for dependent students up to 100. About 67% of state grant recipients are dependents, and so, lowering state grants for those students will make it just harder for students and families to pay for college. I'd also note if there's rationing, there's a potential that the AFR would go over 100%, which would again be impactful to, many middle working class families that don't have a lot of discretionary income to pay for college. So I really appreciate the focus that the committee's had on, making sure that the state grant can be balanced in a way that doesn't disproportionately impact one group of students or one sector. So thank you for considering these comments as you go back and negotiate. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grubner. And want to clarify that I'm not showing partiality to the private colleges by wearing my St. Olaf Canterbury fleece today. It's just what I happened to throw on this morning.
I didn't notice, but now I do. So thank you very much.
Any
Mr.
further-
Chair, over here.
Oh,
I do
sorry,
have a
Senator
follow-up,
Duckworth.
if that's right for, thank you. So I apologize, I missed some of the discussion regarding the parameters earlier this week. Could you please just give me a 30-second recap of the concern regarding the limit on the 1% tuition increase, please?
Ms. Grubner.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Senator Duckworth. I guess what I would say is that the council's perspective is by imposing the 1% cap for the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, that obviously impacts the state grants at nonprofit colleges because our tuition cap is capped at the U of M Twin Cities. And I think the concern is maybe twofold. One is it disproportionately impacts just those students who are choosing to enroll at the U of M Twin Cities and at nonprofit colleges, as opposed to finding a different mechanism of maybe decreasing grants just by a little bit across all 81,000 students. And second is by putting the cap in the formula, it obviously doesn't take into consideration then the full cost that students will have to pay as part of their tuition. So their grant won't reflect the cost that they're having to pay for tuition. So I think not having that imbalance is a concern, and again, just sort of focusing on one sector is also a concern from our perspective.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth?
Thank you, I appreciate that. And can somebody remind me whether or not that parameter change, as reflected in some of the language that's proposed, does that sunset, or would that change be in perpetuity? Does anybody know?
That was just for the next biennium. It was not
Okay.
ongoing.
I appreciate that. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sorry, Senator Duckworth.
No, thank you. I guess I'm a little bit more at ease to hear that it would sunset, but some of what I struggle with regarding the conversation we're having, I understand, we've got a target, so we should be somewhat grateful for that, but all jokes aside, we do spend too much. And one of the issues I have with the approach to trying to stay within target is we're adjusting parameters, which at the end of the day essentially means we're kind of giving students and families less in order to solve the spending issue that we've created as a state government. And so as we look at these parameters and modifications and changes to them, which of course have to be done, I would just urge us all to keep in mind that a little tweak here, a little tweak there, it all adds up. And at the end of the day, when we're looking at a lot of these reductions, they're coming on the backs of students and families rather than state agencies or other areas or other buckets of funding that exist that could be trimmed back or reduced a little bit, not even fully eliminated, but just trimmed back a little bit. So if we could be mindful of that, I would greatly appreciate it as we hopefully get closer and closer to reaching some sort of agreement here. I think there are other areas we can go back to and look at. I've spoken with some folks offline about other buckets of funding that could alleviate the pressure we feel as it relates to our budget, that wouldn't necessarily come at us or come at the expense of us reducing what we can offer students and families regarding their college tuition. The state grant had an issue this last summer. And we're all trying to figure out ways to plus it up, but at the same time, one of the ways we're trying to plus it up is reducing how much we can give to students and families. And so avoiding that situation is something we have to give not only immediate attention to, but also some long-term thought to as well structurally. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I do agree. I think we need to have a much longer-term conversation about the state grant and sustainability as well. Any additional questions, or Representative Robbins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to add my comments to Senator Duckworth's regarding how we're balancing the whole for the state grant. It's a top priority for House Republicans to close the hole in the state grant, and we, in our discussions, have been fighting for that nonstop. And I know that we are not in a position to direct the University of Minnesota to do certain things, but I would just like to point out that part of the problem is the administrative bloat that continues to grow at the University of Minnesota. And here we are working so hard to make sure we're not balancing the budget on the backs of students when the University of Minnesota does not seem to be taking its responsibility to lower its administrative bloat seriously. And just a couple data points I wanted to point out are that in just their Office of DEI, they have 98 employees that get a total of $7.9 million a year. That's a lot of money we could put towards filling the state grant hole. In another effort at the University of Minnesota, which is kind of a struggle for me to even wrap my mind around, when they had a senior vice president for finance in 2023, this person was making $436,000. And then when that person exited, their successor is now making over $700,000, just one position. And the person who exited went on to become a consultant making $961,000. So members, there is money to be found to fix the state grant hole. And it's not necessarily by doing it on the backs of students. And I know that we have to be careful about directing the University of Minnesota, but I would certainly like to encourage them to look at it. I was sent an article today that I printed out, and now I can't find it. But it was from the Minnesota Reformer that I think came out today or this week, about the growth of administrative bloat at the U. And so I think the university does fantastic work. We need the university to be strong, to be a world-class research institution, but the growth of administration in the university needs to be a place where people look to find solutions for the budget problems we are facing.
Thank you, Representative Robbins. Any further discussion? All right, I am going to briefly turn to Mr. Herring to remind me what the process piece here is. So we will be recessing again to the call of the chair, and then I believe our House conferees will continue to discuss our next offer, and then I'm just going to start speaking and hope I say the right things. We will submit that offer and then post it publicly and return 30 minutes after that. All right, I got it right.
Mr. Chair, real quick.
Oh, yes, Chair Rarick.
Did you also open it up to public testimony if anybody else wants to testify?
Thank you, Chair.
Just make
Thank
sure
you.
there's
I
nobody
did
left
forget
out.
that. If there are any members of the public that would like to offer any comments at this time?
Like Allison,
Proceed.
I apologize for speaking to you twice, but thank you for the opportunity. Nikki Valender with Mayo Clinic. Again, I know made the comments on GME on the research front. Just wanted to completely recognize the financial situation of which the state and your committee finds itself in. Did just want to express some disappointment in the narrowing of the Minnesota Partnership Program, which certainly preceded me, but the intent was, I believe, to really harness the research capabilities in the state with the state supporting. And so, understand that decisions need to be made, obviously, but, hope that there might be a future opportunity to really discuss and look at the state's role in keeping Minnesota competitive in the medical and scientific research space. And also, again, recognize the constraints you're under, but did just want to express disappointment as well with support going away for medical students seeking their advanced training. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we recess again, I did just want to announce Chair Wolgamott texted me and wanted folks to know that his absence is purely temporary. It's just a family transportation issue. So he will be back here all as well, just needed to be on dad duty, and that happens from time to time. Senator Duckworth.
I just think it's very fitting that Senator Putnam did not send any context regarding his absence.
We continue to have issues with the St. Cloud delegation, I guess. With that, members, I think we stand in recess.